I'm Corbett Wall with DB Auction, here with your feeder flash for Thursday, November the 5th, brought to you in part by Rio Max Herd Health Low Consumption Mineral Programs. Stop the bleeding, start reducing your winter input costs, keep ranching. Go to riomax.net/podcast to check out Rio Max tailgate talks about ranching and nutrition. Light runs in the south, and I'm talking about feeder cattle runs. It's unbelievable how the numbers in the auctions have just dropped off all of a sudden. Yeah, we're still in the fall of the year. There's still some cattle moving, but not nearly as many as we would typically see, and sure not as many as we're seeing in the northern plains. Just not as many cattle moving at all. OKC West, Reno Livestock Market there had 4,200 head on Wednesday, and you think, well, that's a pretty good run. No, that's a lighter run, and they didn't have a sale last week at all because of the no power around and the ice storms and everything. You compare that 4,200 to a year ago, and it was 10,600 head. And the weather is super nice this week, so there's no reason that they couldn't have got those cattle in there. But you know, it's been so dry in the southern plains. Even if you have you're a cow-calf producer and you normally have calves to sell, you wouldn't have had any place to keep those calves unless you had, you would have already put them into some kind of a growing yard or a preconditioned yard or something like that. Then likely you're not going to sell those cattle right away. But just much lighter runs, and it's something to take note of. I won't mention anything about your presidential election. You guys know what's going on. I think most of us are pretty let down about the results so far, especially when we start seeing some of the things that we were afraid of, some of the crooked stuff that might have been going on. It's just unbelievable how they get these middle of the night vote dumps, and 100% of them are Democratic. I just don't even think you could go into Berkeley, California and get tens of thousands or 100,000 votes, and they'd be 100% for Biden. It's unbelievable, and we're starting to see that it was pretty blatant. But now the mainstream media is going to make Trump look like he's desperate and suing everybody. But I tell you what, it's going to be a mess. I tell you what, they've fought him tooth and nail ever since he come down the escalator. They fought him trying to get elected. They spied on his campaigns. As soon as he got elected, they tried to start getting rid of him. They did a whole conspiracy deal on him, included the FBI. They impeached him over nothing. They've done everything but pull a knife on him, and they haven't stopped yet. And there's so many of them that didn't want to see him get back in again. They just had a whole gamut of crookedness since the time he come down the escalator, and then I guess it's not going to quit until he finally goes back to his golf course or whatever. But it's really a ridiculous thing when you see at least half the country wanted him back in there. But let's look at some of the other things that went on. I talked to you guys last week about the extremely light direct fed cattle movement that we had, not only in your 5-area feeding region, but nationwide. Only 58,000 sold negotiated cash nationwide a week ago, or during last week. And you think, my gosh, there's our problem right now. And I've talked to you guys so many times about how we're pushing this Cattle Market Transparency Act. We want minimum negotiated cash trade in all your major slaughter facilities. And even the voluntary plan that NCBA has put up, that would have the trade was so light, it would have hit a minor trigger in all of your 4 major trade areas because it was so light. and that's only 75% of what they're calling a robust market. But it was ridiculously light, and we keep thinking that these packers are paying attention. You know, they're not going to push the issue on these things where they're price gouging or they're manipulating the market or they're showing their monopolistic ways, but they can't help themselves and they continue to do it. So you know, we've hit every trigger on that voluntary 75% deal. Let's just go ahead and start pursuing something regulatory or legislative that mandates a minimum cash trade. I think it's time to do it right now. They've already hit that. But I want to talk to you about the difference between cash and formula sales. And like I said, those formula sales are largely contracts that are written with your large corporate feeders that have long time been aligned with one packer, which it helps guarantee the packers that their needs are filled, keeps them from having to compete with the other packers to get cattle hanging on the hooks. But there's also smaller feeders out there that have gotten formula deals, and then you can just strike up a weekly formulated deal too. But it's not going to be near as lucrative as those long time arrangements that your corporate feeders have that you and I can't get into, and smaller independent cattle feeders can't get into. But we had 58,000 head negotiated cash trade last week nationwide. We had just around 250,000 head of formulated sales, and I was looking at an old friend of mine, Ed Serwin, and you guys have heard his talks on the broadcasts. He has a newsletter now. He's developed an LLC called CZ Cattle Market Analytics. He's got a newsletter that he puts out. It's pretty good. And if you guys are interested in that, I'm sure you can look into it. But CZ Cattle Market Analytics has a newsletter, has a lot about the cattle markets in there. He and I used to work together years ago. He used to manage the St. Joe Stockyards. Years before that, he worked for Wilson back in the older days. I tell you what, he's done just about everything, but he's really got a passion for analyzing the markets and getting a little more analytical than what I get here. But I was reading his latest newsletter there, and it kind of reminded me of this disparage in the prices between what your cash sellers are getting and what your formula people are getting. But so I told you we had 58,000 negotiated cash sales nationwide last week, 250,000 head of formulated sales last week. And he noted in his newsletter that more cattle are starting to sell formula live basis. So last week we had 66,000 head of those. More cattle sold live basis formula than they did negotiated cash. That's very, very surprising, because most of your formulated sales are all dressed. But it's kind of unbelievable. But if you look at your live weight negotiated sales last week, they were 104.41, and that was FOB. And then your formulated sales live weight basis 109.78. So sure, $5 higher there, and I realize one's FOB and the other's delivered. But then look at your dress difference in price. Your negotiated dress market last week was 161.55, and on a formulated basis dressed 171.66. So $10 a hundred is what guys are leaving on the table selling negotiated cash. And like I said, not to say that you could get it. You guys that are selling cash, that's why most of them sell cash, because they can't get one of the sweetheart deals, and they can't get in those cushy deals. And that's another thing that your Cattle Market Transparency Act would do, is it calls for basically a library of the different formulated sweetheart deals. So you could look in there, see what everybody else is getting, and negotiate your own at that point. But your packers don't want you guys seeing it, and the corporate feeders that already have the sweetheart deal, they don't want you guys seeing it either. They want you just having the spot formulated deal there and take advantage of you that way, and then they can seal up 100% of their needs. Then they won't have to compete for any cattle. But and meanwhile, they're still going to abuse the guys that do sell negotiated cash, because the lion's share of those contract deals still use last week's negotiated cash market to kind of start out with. But like I've said many times before, they include things that we never dreamed they would include. We found out during COVID that they include packer profit sharing and or dressed beef prices, because whenever the price gouging was going on during the panic buying and everything, your packers couldn't afford to pick up those formulated cattle that they had already made deals to pick up. And they just said, well, you know, we're kind of shut down here, so we're not going to be able to honor those contracts and pick up those formulated cattle, leaving their partners stuck with cattle that got too big. Meanwhile, they're going out to smaller cash guys that hadn't seen anybody come to their place for a long time, picking up those cash sales. Some of them even junk cattle, picking up those cattle because they couldn't afford the other cattle because they were charging so much for their dressed beef. But there's lots of things that go in there. I mean, like I've said before, which I'm kind of funny, but they include everything up to and including Big 12 football scores. So, but it would be interesting to be able to get, like they say, a library of those formulated contract negotiations. And I say that's not negotiated. They negotiate them like once a year. Be interesting to see what those are. But that's some interesting information there, and I wanted to give Ed credit for that because he did bring it to my attention. I want to give you guys a DV auction production sale report for October. You know that our bread and butter are production sales, and we're getting more and more involved into commercial marketing, which we started out there. 1999 DV auction was the first outfit to put a camera in a sale barn and put it on that newfangled thing called the internet. But since then, we've grown a lot. We don't solicit cattle, and I think that should ease a lot of you guys that want to do business with us. We don't solicit cattle. We only solicit auctions. So if you're doing business with DV, we're not going to be stepping on your toes out in the country or anywhere else, because we don't solicit cattle. We solicit auctions, and we want to help those of you that are having auctions, livestock auction. We want to help make those even better. But we've got a lot of partners that we work with. But our production sales during the month of October, I'll tell you what kind of volume we're running there. We had around 14,000 bids on our DV auction console during the month of October in our production sales, $43 million in bids, and then finally around $11 million in purchases in our production sales during October, and that gives you an idea what kind of business we're doing there. Let's talk about the board. On Wednesday, December live cattle futures up a nickel at 107.87. February up 47 cents at 110.77. Going out from there on your live cattle, up 37 cents to up $1.10. So all up, and we were kind of down on Tuesday on election day there, but still kind of coming back, and we're on the upswing, guys. November feeder cattle up $1.57 at 137.70. January up $1.97 at 135.15. Going out from there on your feeder cattle, up 82 cents to up $1.72. Your fat cattle trade, we did see some early trades start breaking loose just a little bit on Wednesday. They are going to be higher, getting back towards where we were there just a few weeks ago before we fell off in that big slump. But we're still going to see a big disparage, it looks like, between Northern Plains sales and Southern Plains sales. And yes, the Southern Plains are going to be trading at a premium to the Northern Plains. And you guys say, whoa, 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 all you guys feeding the Southern Plains is junk and Mexicans and things like that. True, but they're selling at a premium to those fancy cattle up north. Iowa, 2,300 head confirmed on Wednesday, from 104 to 105. Nebraska, 2,300 head, 105. And in the Northern Plains, 164 was the big price. on negotiated dressed. But in Nebraska, there was a pretty good slug of them at 160. I'm not sure about the deal there, but it actually pulled the weighted average on dressed cattle down to 161, but it was 160 to 164. But I'd say 164 right now tentatively is your market dressed, and 105 in the northern plains. Southern plains, 107 has pretty much been established. Kansas selling 11,000 head, over 11,000 head at 107 on Wednesday. Texas selling 107 also, so that's a little bit higher, and we'll take it when we can. But you know, the South just doesn't have as many market-ready cattle available as the North does, so they're going to be bringing a premium here for a while. Box beef cutout values: choice cuts $210.19 up 75 cents. Select up $1.60 at $197.05. Slaughter so far for the week through Wednesday, running pretty good, a lot bigger than last week. 359,000, 9,000 more than last week, 3,000 more than the same week a year ago. Let's look at your feeder cattle market, your real-time index on DB auction. Late in the day on Wednesday at 135.37, down 99 cents. I think that's just because there's no yearlings left for the most part, guys. Just all calves now. And those 700-pound calves that we had there a month, 6 weeks ago, they're just getting bigger all the time, and they're throwing into our feeder cattle index levels, and so that's pulling them down a little bit. And we didn't see any of those big premium type sales this Wednesday like we did a week ago. Talk about your big high volume markets. Like I mentioned earlier, OKC West, El Reno livestock market in Oklahoma, 4,200 head there. Like I said, compare that to last year when they had 10,600 head, and they didn't have a sale last week. You would have thought they'd sure had a heavier run. But yearling feeder steers, not well tested. How often are you going to see that at our largest sale barn in the country, OKC West? Yearlings, not well tested. Just didn't have enough of them at all. Calves, steer calves, $3 to $8 higher. Heifer calves, $8 to $12 higher. Winter livestock, Dodge City, Kansas. They did have a few yearlings there, and I'm going to tell you how high they were here in just a minute. But 3,500 head in Dodge City. Feeders there, yearling feeders, $5 to $12 higher. Calves were $12 to $15 higher. Wow, you talk about big time recovery. And then how about some big yearling steers there in Dodge City? 3 loads of them weighed 918 pounds at 145.45. That is high. I'm telling you what, that's getting back up there close to some of those prices we had back in the summer. How about a calf market out in South Dakota? St. Onge, my buddy Justin Tupper there had a good sale. 81 head, 389 pound steer calves, bring 195.25. And then Jared Herman at Cherokee Sales Company, he had some yearling cattle there, 59 head of them, weighed 854 pounds at 142, Cherokee, Oklahoma. The Zach Tran top quote of the day come out of Sheridan Livestock Auction in Rushville, Nebraska. 55 head, 406 pound steer calves, bring $200.75. And that's your feeder flash for Thursday.